Okay, so once again, thank you everyone, and welcome to our OCM BOCES Thompson Road Career and Technical Education and New Visions program webinar this evening. I'd like just to say, as we look to return to school, this is an important part of our communication with families and, to share the most up-to-date reopening plans with you. In a moment, we'll talk about Zoom Webinar and the different features that are associated with Zoom Webinar. But I'd just like to say I'm joining you live. I'm excited from our early childhood education classroom in our Thompson Road campus. So we're going to be providing a lot of information to you tonight. Before I begin, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Eric Comtois. I'm the Director of Career and Technical Education and Innovative Ed at OCM BOCES. So I'm also going to allow our other co-presenters to introduce themselves now.
Welcome, I'm Peter Hahn, Principal at the Thompson Road Center.
And I'm Carrie Faulkner. I'm the Assistant Principal at the Thompson Road Center.
So Mr. Hahn and Ms. Faulkner and I will be taking turns throughout the evening presenting the information to you. Before we begin, and we go to the next slide, I'd like to review the features of Zoom Webinar. I see some of you have already started to use those features. But number one, we're going to start as close to 6:30, and we've started now, and we're going to try to end as close to 7:30 as we can. We want to respect your time with us. As questions come up, we just ask that you please write them in the Q&A section at the bottom, and we'll address them. So if you have specific questions or comments, we're asking you not to use the chat at this time. If you can use the Q&A. And those we'll be recording those. We'll be monitoring those questions throughout the session. At the end, we'll have time to address those. At any time, if you're unable to hear or see us, please just put that in the Q&A as well, so we can figure that out. So we're going to review our agenda tonight. The first item that I will be reviewing is our OCM BOCES school reopening plan. We won't go into great detail on the reopening plan. It is a fairly heavy document and it is available on our OCM BOCES website, but I will show you how to access that in a moment. We'll be talking about our health and safety procedures. Obviously, this is very important to our ability to reopen and have an environment that is safe and successful for our students. We'll have some information about our classroom and laboratory arrangements and procedures. We've been doing a lot of work in the past several weeks on getting our rooms and all of our spaces prepared so that we can welcome students back. We'll have a conversation around what students can expect as we enter school in the next few weeks. We'll have discussions, and I see that some already put it in the Q&A about our embedded program sites. So we'll talk about those sites and work-based learning opportunities that we have available to our students. We'll talk about preparing your child for reopening. So what can you do to best support your child as we head back to school? And then we'll talk about our instructional practices, whether that is in person or through a remote learning option. And we'll talk about the difference of each throughout this webinar. We'll finally end with a question and answer session. Again, we ask that you use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit questions. And once again, we will be able to see your questions. We will address them as we are able. If there are certain questions that are only applying to your child, we will reach back out to you and address those individually. Okay, next slide. This slide discusses our reopening plan, and this is a picture of that reopening plan, which is available on our website, ocmboces.org/reopening2020. So we'll take a quick look at that. Once again, a lot of components go into our reopening plan, as advised by the New York State Department of Education. In addition to the reopening plan being available on our website, there are also many other tools and resources available to you that you can look through as they relate to reopening, or if you have a specific question about anything that's mentioned tonight and you would like to dig a little bit deeper, feel free to navigate through our website to the reopening plan. Our next slide discusses that reopening plan a little bit more specifically and talks about the different considerations that are included within the reopening plan, starting with communication and community engagement, which we're doing here tonight. We're starting with our outreach to you, and we've been reaching out through phone calls to discuss our program and in addition to that, we're holding these webinars this week for all of our programs here in student programs at OCM BOCES. Some of the other considerations: health and safety, facilities, transportation, right down the line to special ed services, attendance, and our technology and connectivity. It's very important to note that these plans have really truly been a collaborative effort. Beginning back when schools closed in March, we began having meetings in different programs, and we met regularly to discuss school reopening. So stakeholder groups have included our OCM BOCES administration, staff members, students, parents alike to add to this reopening plan. So this collaborative work is the reason that we've been able to successfully construct our plan. Additionally, our school has been, as normal, remained in contact with our district partners, including principals, Department of Transportation, and our guidance counselors. So, we certainly appreciate their help and your support as well as we've created this document. At the bottom here, you'll note that all OCM BOCES student programs, and we are very excited to announce this, are offered in person 5 days per week, and that is in compliance with the CDC and Department of Health guidelines. We spent a lot of time before we submitted our reopening plan assessing our space, our enrollment, and seeing what we could accommodate in terms of number of students in our building. So we're very excited that across all of our student programs that we're able to offer the in-person instruction 5 days per week. It's also important to note that we are offering an all remote instruction option if that is what you choose. So the first item or consideration that we're going to cover in terms of our reopening is our health and safety procedures. Obviously, this is a large consideration when we are welcoming students and staff back into our programs. So our first slide that we'll cover here is our protocols around cleaning. Again, there will be a lot of information in these next several slides that I'll be going over. Feel free to put it down in the Q&A if you would like more clarification on any of these items. So in addition to our normal routine cleaning that we do in all of our buildings, high-touch areas will be cleaned multiple times a day. So you think about those high-touch areas in any building, those would be those tabletops, doorknobs, desk surfaces, and whatnot. All of the cleaning products that we will be using in the building are approved by the CDC and the EPA for COVID-19. We have purchased Clorox 360 sprayers that will also be used for disinfecting. In addition, bathrooms will be cleaned at least 3 times per day. So we have the staff within all of our buildings to clean bathrooms and those high-touch areas throughout the day. Continuing on with health and safety procedures, as an organization, we have decided that we will conduct daily temperature screenings, and those will be administered to all students upon arrival at the building. It's important to note that parents and guardians are also responsible for evaluating your child's health each day before sending them to school, and those plans would be consistent with component school district procedures. So our temperature screenings are part of our process, but we're also in contact with school districts to make sure that we have the most current information from any questionnaires that you should be completing through the district. Also, informational materials regarding COVID-19 symptoms are being developed through our different departments here at OCM BOCES, and those will be sent home. So those health and safety videos will be made available to you through various forms of communication as we approach the school year and as the school year evolves. Now we're going to get into specifics about those screenings, and then we'll discuss what the result of the screenings, what next steps would be. So students or staff members exhibiting symptoms during the school day will be sent to the health office for an assessment by the school nurse. So when a student is exhibiting those symptoms, the school nurse will get directly involved. Any student or staff member with a temperature of 100 degrees or greater should not be present in school. I had mentioned before, screening questionnaires will be used to determine if an individual not only is, through our screening has developed symptoms or is displaying symptoms, but has experienced symptoms in the past, been exposed to or tested positive, or has traveled to a location that is on the travel advisory list. Now we'll discuss students exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms will be contacted to pick up their child and instructed to contact their healthcare provider immediately. So this is important. I know you've been receiving calls, and if you have not received a call, you will be in the coming days from our school. One of the things we'll be asking you is to make sure that we have the updated contact information on file for your child. It's in the event that your child is exhibiting symptoms, it's essential that they're picked up immediately. So you can see the importance of having the most up-to-date contact information, including information about who would be available to pick up your son or daughter if they needed to be picked up immediately. And this is taking into account their safety and the safety of others. So the child who exhibits COVID-19 symptoms must be seen by a healthcare provider, and that healthcare provider will determine if a COVID-19 test is necessary. If the healthcare provider deems that the COVID-19 test is not necessary, the following must happen in order for the child to return to school. So the student must have been fever-free without the use of fever-reducing medicines. Student must have felt well for 24 hours. And the student will need a doctor's note stating the student is cleared to return to school. For students who test positive for COVID-19, the regulations, and again, this is all guided by the Department of Health and the CDC. So a student who tested positive would stay home for at least 10 days since the first symptoms. It's been at least 3 days since the student had a fever without medicine. It's been at least 3 days since the student's symptoms improved, including cough and shortness of breath. And finally, an order of release from the Department of Health. This slide here discusses, and I'll give you a moment to take a look at it, but it discusses contact tracing in Onondaga County. So if there is a confirmed case, positive case of a student in our program, we are going to work directly with the Department of Health for contact tracing. The contact tracer is based on interviews and identifies who needs to be issued a 14-day quarantine. If that person who was issued the 14-day quarantine tests negative, the person will still need to complete the 14-day quarantine. On a separate note, the Onondaga County Health Department has said they will be providing mobile testing sites at different districts around Onondaga County. You may have heard that in the news in the past week or so. And this is so that staff and high school students who want to get tested can get tested for COVID-19 prior to the school year starting. This testing would be voluntary. Also, during the school year, the Onondaga County Health Department has indicated they will conduct surveillance testing at various schools across Onondaga County. Surveillance testing involves a saliva sample collected by swabbing the person's mouth. Surveillance testing involves taking saliva samples from 12 people, and this is also, you might have heard of this as pool testing, and running a test of those 12 samples to see if anyone in the group has tested positive. If there is a positive result from the pool testing, it would be requested that the 12 individuals get a diagnostic test. Surveillance testing allows the Department of Health to determine if COVID-19 is present in a larger group of people. Surveillance testing would not be completed without parent permission. We'll discuss school sanitization. Custodial staff will disinfect and sanitize each area daily, including tools and equipment. So this is important when we're talking about some of our CTE programs and the different tools and equipment that are expected to use in hands-on instruction. And we'll talk more about what that might look like when we discuss instructional practices later on in our presentation. Hand sanitizer will be available, and hand washing will be encouraged throughout the day. It's important to note that we will be educating the students on the why of positive health and hygiene. Staff will have access to disinfecting supplies to use between classes, and drinking fountains have been covered, but the bottle filling stations are still open. Your child may bring a water bottle. We're just asking that those water bottles are labeled and, of course, not shared. When talking about our personal protective equipment, the first item on the list here are face coverings or masks. So a mask, we're asking that approved masks cover nose and mouth, and that the school is required to have masks available to those students or staff who do not have them. So we will have extra masks available for those students who do not come to school with masks. We'll discuss more about the expectations for mask wearing in the upcoming slides. Cleaning and sanitizing supplies, including disinfecting wipes and cleaners, will be present in all of our classroom spaces and our common areas. Hand washing and correct hygiene will be discussed throughout the opening of school. Hand sanitizer will be available in all of our instructional spaces as well. And of course, students will be encouraged to regularly use proper hand and respiratory hygiene. Finally, OCM BOCES has and will continue to make available those educational resources that will support and promote health and safety in our schools. And signs are now being delivered to our buildings, and we're starting to put those up around the building. And on our next slide, we have some examples of those. So these are some of the examples of slides that will be present at all building entrances and hallways and in common spaces, and as well in the classrooms. So any guests or visitors to the school will be asked to immediately report to the reception desk and complete a COVID-19 screening questionnaire. So you'll see this first sign as you enter the building. The next sign promotes properly storing and discarding PPE. Of course, promoting proper washing of hands as frequently as possible, social distancing, and we'll talk more about that as we get into our presentation, but it is expected. So that would be staying 6 feet apart at all times. We'll talk about the way to avoid the spread of germs. That will be part of the education process. And then, of course, wearing a mask at all times when moving throughout the building. The expectation that students will be wearing masks throughout their time with us on campus and to and from campus. So I'd just like to say, before I turn it over to our other presenters, I am going to begin monitoring our Q&A at the bottom. So if you do have any questions, please put them at the Q&A. We do have many piling up here, so I will do my best to sort through these, and we'll get through as many of them towards the end of the presentation. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hun to talk more about our specific spaces and what students can expect upon return to school.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you folks for being part of our webinar tonight. You can imagine how excited that kids will be as they get off the bus in September, or dropped off by parents, or perhaps driving if they do that. So let's take a look and see what kids can expect. So each student will have an individual workspace, and that will be distanced by 6 feet. We've taken great measures to measure everything. And it seems like this is the first time during the summer that Mrs. Faulkner and I have been walking around the school with yardsticks or tape measures and looking at everything in that aspect, because it's important to us that we keep that social distancing. Students and staff must wear a face covering or a mask in school at all times, unless there's a break, and we'll talk about that now in terms of what would a break look like. Just when the teacher feels that the kids really do need that stop from the mask, and that all social distancing is being observed, take a limited break from the masks. Now, the hallways in our building are configured in such a way to really allow a good flow, and in many cases a one-way direction flow. And that is because that students come in and go to one particular room, and you don't hear a bell ring and then they proceed to another room, as in their home high school. So we're pretty confident that we will be able to do that one-way flow, and things will be configured properly. Social distancing, we mentioned that a number of times, but it's so important with the face coverings, with the masks, and program-specific equipment will remain intact in terms of we will make sure that the kids are having, for example, welding, and that you're seeing one of our welding booth setups there. They'll be wearing the special welding gloves and the welding coats, and of course the helmets, as well as the masks. Limited sharing of tools, and what we mean by that, there are some tool items that, for example, a drill press, or something where we have one or two in a shop, because it's not something like a wrench, for example, in the auto tech shop, that kids can get and then use the entire time they're there, and then it'll be sanitized in between the morning and the afternoon sessions. But the equipment that really needs to be shared will be cleaned in between use. And to be honest with you, most of the time, that the teachers have already done this in other years, because clean tools are safe tools, and that's part of our protocol. And then the proper work attire for each program. For example, cosmetology, they'll be wearing aprons, and then in welding, as I mentioned, the protective gear and scrubs in some of the health programs. Here are a couple of examples of what the classrooms look like now. So on the left, that is the early childhood education classroom. That's where Mr. Comtois is speaking. I don't know if he's sitting in a yellow chair or a red chair there, but you can see how those seats are arranged 6 feet, and in some cases maybe a little bit more than that. And we want to make sure that it fits all of the kids for social distancing. We also will be able to operate, as far as we know now, we're getting a lot of questions from preschool parents. We do a little preschool with just a couple of tots in the morning, a couple in the afternoon, and we believe that will be allowed to continue. The picture on the right, I can assure you that those patients have a temperature well below 100 because they're plastic. They are the mannequins for the health occupations students, and that would be a good example of items that are judiciously cleaned and sanitized, even in normal years, in normal conditions, but we'll take extra care for that this year too. Students can expect when they get to our building that just like normal, not all the districts send the buses at the exact same time, so there's that staggered arrival, staggered dismissal. And when the students come in, we ask that they go right to their classroom. They'll know exactly which one they're going to report to. And I mention that because in some of the bigger programs, for example, cosmetology, we have at least 3 rooms that are assigned to that so that we can make sure social distancing occurs easily. And the teachers that will tell the students, perhaps the day before, they'll get their assignments, you'll be in room such and such when you come in the next day. And we will announce by district when the buses are here, and we have a number of exits for actually entrances and exits, so that we're minimizing a pile up of kids. We just don't expect to have that. So all available instructional spaces are being utilized, as I mentioned before, classrooms and labs or shops by cohorts, so that we're really pretty sure where everybody is and that the numbers are just right. Now, hands-on experience will be emphasized with certainly increased safety precautions, but safety is pretty much our main business, and the kids, especially who have been there before, the seniors returning, know that we do safety first thing in the fall. And the cleaning normally occurs. It's going to be increased, as I mentioned about the tool sharing and things of that nature. You know, really in all industry, not only now, but in past times, cleanliness, safety, sanitation is paramount. And that is something that we have been teaching for years and years and years. This will just give us another chance to say to these students, listen, this is really what's happening in the industry, and this is kind of the new normal at this point. Outside of the program space, limited movement, that really is just a fancy way of saying that there won't be a lot of kids in the hallways at all times, and we're going to keep an eye on that. Visitors to the buildings will be limited. That is always the case. I should mention that we are pretty popular with alumni, and it's not uncommon that some sort of stop out of the blue, especially graduates of the past 5 years wanting to tell their teachers about some great job that they've gotten. And while we appreciate that, that's the kind of thing that we're going to be doing this year. Students are asked not to bring food into the classroom and into the shop or lab spaces. And you may wonder, well, how are you going to do that with the food culinary students? Well, they will prepare food, but then they subsequently consume it, or if they don't want to, we'll just have to get rid of it, I suppose. But we're not going to be sharing food. We are famous in our OCM BOCES Thompson Road campus for a couple of restaurants, and they will be closed for now, so there will not be any food sharing, people buying French fries and maybe sharing it with a close friend. That'll have to be put off for later times. If students bring water bottles, and many do, parents make sure that before students arrive with the water bottles, that they just put a sticker on them, label it first and last name, so we know whose water bottle is who, especially with those expensive Yetis. They all kind of look the same these days. Embedded program sites, and you can see a list of them there on your screen. Some of them have been changed, but all of the ones that are still meeting in the industry sites, Drivers Village, for example, and our new program at Tracy Road Equipment in Syracuse, and perhaps the Civic Center for Criminal Justice. That's something that's in the works as we speak. All of the host sites know exactly about all their safety guidelines. We will follow all of those as well as our OCM guidelines. Now, physical therapy professions and New Vision medical professions had to be relocated to our Thompson Road campus to begin the school year. We have promises from other host sites that we want those students, but we're just not ready to take young people at this point, or guests in hospitals or colleges or things of that nature. And the New Vision Engineering, Lockheed Martin, all of their facilities from down south to the one here in Liverpool, they've made a corporate decision that they're really downsizing their in-person staff, and that included our classroom. So they'll be at Thompson Road, our New Vision Engineering students, 5 days a week to begin the school year. Work-based learning, we're famous for that, and I'm thinking of some of the CDOS students who really enjoy working in-house, and maybe some of the landscaping projects for our facilities and ground maintenance. We will, especially the outside projects, continue those as best as possible. Outside opportunities will be assessed individually. I can tell you one that I think we've assessed to our satisfaction. We have a construction house for our construction tech CTE students, and the students know that's got to get a roof on it soon, and we have our plywood all set, ready to go, and there's certainly ample opportunity to social distance and be outside as well, so that should work out well. All the virtual learning experiences, like visits from professionals and some college reps, maybe some job shadowing, and employer panels will happen virtually, and we will endeavor to do those. Student drivers, I think we're going to have more this year than we've ever had. I'm hearing from some of my high school principal colleagues with the question, is it okay if so-and-so drives? And I said, well, as long as it's okay with you and okay with the moms or dads, we have a big parking lot. We just want to make sure that the students come to us for actually, we'll go around to the classrooms this year. Mrs. Faulkner and I will do that. An application to the drivers for a driving pass. Parents just need to sign that. Also homeschool principals, and then we'll know that they're fully authorized as well. When the students come in from the parking lot, we will do a temperature screening similar to the students arriving in the buses. A single driver policy. What that means is we're continuing to enforce, as we have for decades, that if the student chooses to drive, that he or she be the only occupant in that motor vehicle. That's something that the authorities and all of my homeschool colleagues are interested in as well. And we have a large parking lot, as I mentioned before. We will designate where the students should park. If you have a question about what do I do with my student who needs to drive on the first day and he or she can't get a pass until they drive there, but they can't drive there until they get a pass, we're going to kind of put that in hiatus for the first day or so. So if somebody needs to drive the first day at school, they can do that, as long as they obey all the speed limits and the traffic rules as well. Okay, we're going to hear about how to continue on helping your young person return to school, and Mrs. Faulkner is here to walk us through that.
Hi, yes, I'd like to add, I'm going to add to this presentation how you can help your child as we start school in September. So to prepare your child for the return to school, we ask you that you be positive and reassuring. We can definitely assure you that we are excited to have your children back as well. As we return, there will be a lot of new norms, which we have already all discussed. So if you can please help your child by explaining why these new rules are so important and why we have to take these new precautions. As we have heard many times, proper hand hygiene is one of the biggest defenses for keeping your child safe. So please help to explain why it is so important to wash hands and to use hand sanitizer frequently throughout the day. The proper use of masks, as we've already discussed, a proper mask needs to cover the mouth and nose while he or she is wearing it. Your child can expect to wear the mask at increased lengths of time, but we will be providing mask breaks. They would just be short and monitored, but they should be prepared for wearing the mask for the majority of the time while being in the building. We are lucky in our programs, as we've already stated, that once they enter the building and enter their classroom, there's no need to switch to another classroom. So there will not be any transitions during that whole block of time while they're at OCM BOCES. Please remind your child the importance of the 6-foot social distancing. As we've discussed with our staff already, we know that your children are probably well accustomed to it when they go into stores. So we are going to continue that 6-foot social distancing when they're in classrooms as well. Our teachers will be preparing your child with health and safety protocols as early as day one when they enter into one of our programs. These are learned protocols that are just as important in the field they're studying. So we are so supportive of learning these health and safety protocols because more than likely they will need to use those when they enter the workforce in the field that they're studying. And as we stated already, OCM BOCES, we will be sharing resources throughout the year. So we encourage you to review them with your child. The next section that I'm going to discuss is the two options that we are offering. It's the 5 days of in-person instruction or the all remote instruction. For the in-person instruction, we know this is probably why they are entering into CTE. They are very eager for the hands-on portion of the learning. We are going to continue all of those hands-on learning experiences. And I can assure you also that our teachers have missed it just as much as some of the seniors that are going to be coming back to our CTE programs. Both in-person and remote instruction, we will utilize instructional technology such as Google Classroom, and students will be using individual devices. They will not be shared. Instructional objectives will be the same for both in-person and remote instruction. Meeting those objectives may look a little different, but they will meet those objectives. For students choosing remote instruction, all necessary supplies will be provided. You don't need to be concerned about rummaging up the supplies necessary to complete all the tasks remotely. Teachers will be available daily for interactions with your children, and we will be using those daily interactions for taking our daily attendance. So that will be important that your child understands when your teacher plans on meeting your children, so that we can document that attendance appropriately. And for remote instruction, we will be using Google Meet and Zoom, which are a couple of platforms that have been widely used since all the remote instruction has started. If a student chooses remote learning, they must follow the timeline of their home district. We know that the different districts have different policies of when they can choose to come back for in-person instruction. So it's important to either speak to the school counselor or administration in the home district. We are currently working out the exact schedule and logistics of the remote instruction, but you can expect clear communication as we move forward. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Comtois.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hahn and Mrs. Felkner. I've been busy collecting questions. We have upwards of 50 questions here, so I certainly appreciate the participation. And just the number of participants on this webinar is amazing. It really shows your commitment to your students and our program, so we certainly appreciate that. So our questions started coming in early on in our presentation. From there, I feel like we've answered many of those questions, but if not, please continue to use that Q&A. We will be reaching out to you if we don't get your question, but I've really been trying to consolidate them into kind of different boxes here, so we can maybe hit many of these questions with one kind of statement. I would say the most asked question is regarding transportation. So we're continuing to work with our district partners, administrators, and our transportation directors on the scheduling of buses. So districts are working to make sure that they have a plan in order to meet the social distancing guidelines and mask wearing guidelines on buses. So they are certainly busy working on transportation now. You should be hearing from your districts regarding their plans in the coming weeks, but if we can help facilitate any of those discussions or you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. So I'm going to look through here and see if we have any specifically related to transportation. Let's see. So we've had assurances from all of our districts, minus a few, that they will be transporting students all 5 days, no matter which instructional model they're using. So if they have a hybrid model where students only attend 2 days per week and are remote the other 3, they have assured us that they will transport to BOCES CTE programs 5 days per week. Again, there are a few exceptions, but that will be communicated in the coming weeks to you. Okay. What is the plan for my child going to Tracy Road? I think for the new program, I think we hit on that we will be in-person instruction at Tracy Road, and we're very, very excited to get that heavy equipment program up and running. And of course, I will say that any of our health and safety guidelines that we are expecting at our Thompson Road campus, we are expecting at all of our embedded programs. Additionally, we will be working with the business or the industry to make sure that we're also meeting their guidelines if they are different at all from ours. Someone asked about our media marketing program at WCNY. They didn't see it on the screen, so we may have missed that one, but we will be in-person instruction at WCNY as well. So students will be transported directly from WCNY. I can't find it now, but someone asked if they are going to an embedded site, do they come to the Thompson Road campus first? No, they will be transported to their embedded site to and from directly. Let's see. How will they be socially distanced on the bus? So that is a challenge that districts are working on now to make sure that they are meeting the social distancing guidelines on the bus, which would include the wearing of masks and that 6-foot distancing. If a student is sent home with COVID symptoms or is out awaiting a test result or is out with any illness, can the student log in remotely to not miss instruction? So it would be if a student was out for a prolonged period of time, whether it was COVID related or not, we would provide the instruction necessary for them to remain on pace with their class. So they would be, we'd look at the learning objectives and find the best way that they could be successful so that when they return to in-person, they can catch right up with the rest of the group. Is screening questionnaire just questions that staff ask to students or a form or on an app? So the screening questionnaire that you would receive would be in line with your home school district. So they will be providing those. So which format they use will be dependent on the district. Our screening measures would be the temperature screening daily, and we would be gathering any screening questionnaire information directly from the districts. If my student is doing virtual learning with his school, can I drop and pick him up? Can I pick up my student for his BOCES class, or does he have to attend class in person at his high school to attend BOCES? So if I'm reading that correctly, if they're choosing virtual at the home district, can they still attend in person? So that would be a decision that we'd want to discuss with the guidance counselor or the administrator at your home school. So I encourage you to reach out to them to discuss the different options that they were choosing. If they decided that they would accept virtual for the high school and in person at BOCES, we could accommodate that. Will kids be able to drive there or be picked up at the high school by a bus? So we, as Mr. Hun explained, we do have driving permits, so students can drive. Of course, we just need sign off by parents and the homeschool. We've had discussions with all of our homeschool administrators about the driving policies, and if we want to make updates to that, we can do that, but we understand that there may be more of a need for student drivers this year. There was a question, and I can't find it now, about siblings. Can siblings ride in a car together? The answer is yes, they may ride in the car together. My son will be doing 100% remote learning. Will BOCES be doing synchronous learning? For example, will he log on during his normal class time, or will slides be sent home like last year? That's really a great question. So we're working on our schedules and protocols for remote learning. So being in person 5 days, the teacher will be committed to teaching those students in person, and then additionally for those who are remote learning. So while that may not happen directly while students are in person, there will be a time for students to check in daily with those remote learners as well. We're still working on the schedule and identifying what time of day that would be best to check in with those students. Again, obviously hands-on learning, we really value that here, so we will do our best to provide experiences that would prepare any students who are remote learning, prepare them for that hands-on piece in the future. So, we're up to about 80 questions now. So I'm not thinking we're going to get to everybody, but I'm just going to keep plugging away here. Will we have the option to purchase our own welding, safety, clothing, and equipment to cut down on having to share? I've been talking a lot. Mr. Hun, do you want to take that one?
Well, typically, the students are assigned a coat. I signed a purchase order a few weeks ago to that effect. And very similar to other programs that have had uniforms in the past, and I'm thinking about the medical programs where they have scrubs. I think we're getting into a situation where students can take home their clothing rather than in the past they left it with us and it was laundered kind of en masse. But the student will be provided with a welding coat.
Mm-hmm. Lots of questions about schools doing 2 days a week, and will I still be bused 5 days a week, or can I still attend? Yes, you may still attend, and you may attend for those 5 days in person. There were other questions about, can I drive my child to the campus? The question, the answer is yes. Mr. Hun, there were a few questions just about what is the protocol for arrival and dismissal for those students who are dropped off.
So what we have done in the past, and that's a very good question because it causes me to get out a Post-it note here. And so Mrs. Faulkner and I can consider this further, but typically what we have done, we have said to drivers that you need to be arriving within 5 minutes or so of when your district's bus gets there. We didn't want to make it so that kids who drove thought, well, I can get there anytime I want. So it really is something that will have to be somewhat determined as we find out when the district buses are going to come in. When North Syracuse buses will come versus Marcellus, which usually a little bit later. But I would say that probably the best rule of thumb is get there as early as you can based on our times of arrival and dismissal, and here they are. For the morning, for the seniors, 8 o'clock in the morning till 10:30 a.m. And then in the afternoon, which actually starts in the late morning for the juniors, 11:35 until 2:15. So those are the times that classes start. That's when the bells ring for arrival and dismissal for our 2 sessions. And we prefer that parents, if you're going to drop your student off, especially this year, no more than 5 minutes before any of those times.
Great, thank you, Mr. Han. That was a question that came up frequently, were the times So I appreciate you adding that to the conversation. What is the decision making around who attends morning and afternoon? Mr. Hun, do you want to take that one as well?
Well, that's a guidance decision. School counselors, both primarily in the home district, working with Mrs. Muller, our school counselor, or Mrs. Popkis, the CDOS counselor, and making a decision to that effect.
So typically, our programs are 2-year programs. So seniors or year 2 students would attend in the morning, and our year 1 first-year students, typically juniors, would attend in the afternoon. Will the culinary arts program prepare food, or will the program be class and paperwork only? How will it look? So that's a great question. We're looking to provide hands-on learning opportunities whenever possible. So students will be able to prepare food, and we're just asking that they're not sharing. We're expecting that they are not sharing, and they will not be eating food prepared by someone else. So they will have those learning experiences as normal in terms of preparation of food, but they just will not be sharing or preparing for any other student.
I should mention that we're getting a brand new serving line in our main restaurant. We'll have to put that on hold to get it in full operation, but the students coming, both the juniors and the seniors, if you're a parent of a culinary student, there's good news in a redesign in the restaurant, and that will provide opportunity for learning how to set up a modern restaurant.
Another great question here. Do we have to sign up to do in-person learning, or only if we are choosing remote learning? We are currently, we have a large student population, so we're currently making phone calls home. Many of you probably have already received a phone call to ask what your intention is for the upcoming school year, either in-person or remote learning. So at this point, if we have not heard from you, if we haven't been able to reach you, we're asking that you call us back and provide us with that information. But we'll also be sending a letter out in the mail this week, assuming that if we're not able to contact you, that you would be in person. But if you are choosing remote, we're asking you that you just update that information with us as well. Again,
and I can just add that if you felt like you had missed the call and you wanted to call us to let us know, the phone number that was on this webinar letter, you can call, and that would be my direct office number. You can call that and let me know if you are choosing in-person or remote for your child.
Mm-hmm. What happens if the students exceed, so student enrollment exceeds the allowed space in classrooms? Well, as I said earlier on, that we spent a lot of time looking at all of our spaces within our building at our Thompson Road campus, including our classroom space, any extra classrooms that we might have available to us, and our laboratory spaces. So if it gets to the point where our enrollment is exceeding the amount of space that we have, then we'd look to find other space to make sure that we can accommodate our learners, or we would have conversations around that. But you would definitely be included in those conversations.
And if I may mention about the embedded sites, we really hit the jackpot in especially the WCNY providing us with the Enterprise America space, which is a good part of the third floor. I think it's the third floor, second floor, the third floor. But that's going to be much more space than we would need for students, and it'll provide a wonderful opportunity for our new media marketing teacher to use the new video equipment that we are putting in place in various points in that Enterprise America facility at WCNY. Our Tracy Road facility is very spacious and will certainly fit the students assigned there.
Great, thank you. There are many questions that I'm reading over that pertain particularly to your child's situation. So I encourage you to reach out, and we will provide answers to those questions as I look through. I'm looking for those questions that would apply to the most of our members here on the call tonight. Will students take any core classes in BOCES, such as science or math? If so, will they stay in the same classroom as well? Again, great question. Depending on the course, students would receive credit, high school credit in science or math, or aligned college credit as well to some of our programs. So the idea is that we're looking to limit transitions within the building. So students would arrive on campus and head to one space, whether it's the classroom or the lab space, and they will look to remain in those spaces for their time with us on that day. Our content area teachers in science or math, they will be doing more of the traveling into classrooms instead of vice versa, where students would be moving to different classroom spaces. And of course, whenever we change, at the end of the day, we would have the sanitization of the rooms. And if students are changing classrooms, those areas would be disinfected in between that time. Again, I want to appreciate all of your efforts and all of your questions. This is great. So how does it work if there's a snow day for some schools and not others, and for schools with different holiday schedules? Great question. I do encourage you to look at our OCM BOCES calendar. So we will follow that calendar, understanding that district calendars may be a bit different. So we would work, in conjunction with the school districts. Schools would be sending students on those different days. For the most part, the districts follow their own calendar in terms of when schools send students to us. But if we're open, we're welcoming our students to attend on those days. School districts make decisions on snow days, and then we make decisions based on the number of districts that may choose to have a snow day. So that's directly related to transportation, and we would be making decisions and announcing that as we normally would in terms of snow days. Okay. Apologize, I'm reading through here and scanning through. When new questions come in, they don't just go to the end, they put them somewhere in the middle. So I'm sorting through to see if there's anything that I've missed that would be appropriate to answer to the entire group. Will there be clinical for health occupation students? Great question. At this time to start the year, we won't be having our students attend those clinical opportunities in the nursing home at this time. We're still remaining very close contact with all of our clinical sites and kind of discussing when it would be appropriate to have students back in those sites from our vantage point for health and safety and from the business end as well. Alternatives, we're looking at many different instructional resources that we can use to provide. And of course, they will provide clinical skills within their classroom spaces. So we have clinical spaces, so students would be under direct instruction of our instructor and our clinical instructors as well. What is the date for the first day of school? So if you look on our calendar, it is listed for OCM BOCES as September 8th. You might notice some other districts have changed their starting dates. At this point, we are looking, and this will be sent to the board for approval this week, but we're looking to push our start back date one day to September 9th for in-person instruction and remote instruction as well. Okay, here I've got some messages in the chat. Let me see if I can locate COVID-related questions. Okay, we're up to 100 questions, so it is tricky to go through and filter through to find particular questions. So I apologize for that. So if you give me a moment, I do notice we're running up on 7:30, so I will take one or two more questions, the time to answer. If I am not able to answer the specific question you're looking for, again, please reach directly out to us and we'd be happy to do that. Um, How will you be able to limit the sharing of tools in the culinary program as it relates to COVID? Another great question. We have the luxury of we have many tools, not just in culinary but in all of our programs. That sometimes, there may be the need to share tools. Just thinking about maybe some of our programs like construction where we're not able to have one tool for every student. So we're really going to be promoting, obviously, the social distancing, the wearing of masks, the wearing of gloves when appropriate, and the cleaning and disinfecting of those tools between their uses by students. So students should not be sharing tools without them being cleaned in between. So we will have protocols in place for that to begin the year, and clear communication with our teachers and our cleaning staff around that as well.
And we really do that anyway, because our restaurants are licensed, and the county health department does the regular checks just like they would any restaurant that would be out in the general industry.
Correct. So if a child has, I think this may be the question that we're referring to, if a child has a fever, do they automatically have to get a COVID-19 test? So a student who's exhibiting symptoms would be seen by our school nurse. That school nurse would be calling home. So say in this case, if the student had a fever, to share that the student has symptoms, parents would be asked to pick up that student immediately and be referred to and be seen by a healthcare provider. It would be up to the healthcare provider to decide if a COVID-19 test is necessary, and then that would answer some of the questions on next steps. So in those cases, we defer to the healthcare professionals. So I see that we are up on our time at 7:30. So if we go to the last slide, please just take note. Again, if I was not able to answer your questions, I apologize. I certainly appreciate all the participants we have on the call tonight. So please feel free to reach out with those questions. We will be keeping a log of the questions and reviewing them as well. So please contact the school if you have any questions. Again, we're going to continue to be making calls to update any contact information that we have on file. Also, if you have yet to confirm in-person or remote instruction, we're asking that you please notify of this by August 26th, which is next week. This is really vitally important to our planning for the school year in terms of making plans for in-person and or remote instruction. So at this time, we are going to conclude our webinar. Again, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you, your students, back in person here in the next several weeks. So thank you again. Have a great night.